So far, we've been using the single symbol renderer, and in this video, we're going to discuss using the categorized and graduated renderers in QGIS. These can be used for point, line, or polygon data. And what I'm going to do to start is turn off a couple of these layers, and I'm going to zoom out to all of Denmark by right-clicking on Kommune and zoom to layer. And I see all the Kommune in Denmark. Now, one of the attribute fields that I have in here is the size of each polygon in hectares. And these are multi-part polygons, meaning that for Kommune that have a bunch of islands, each island is its own feature. So we have some very small polygons and some very large polygons. And what I'm going to do is duplicate the Kommune layer by right-clicking and choosing Duplicate Layer. And I'm going to rename this Kommune by size. And I'm going to turn this on. I'll turn off the original. And I'm going to remove this simple line component, and I'm going to convert this back to a solid fill. Make it black or something like that. So we have all the Kommune just as regular polygons. And I'm going to switch this from single symbol to graduated. Graduated rendering is where you render polygons, lines, or points based on a numeric attribute. So we have hectares as a number. So once I choose this renderer, I need to choose a value, which is one of my attribute columns. So I'm going to scroll through my attribute columns, and QGIS will only show me the numeric attributes. I'm going to choose the hectare column, and then I'm going to choose a color ramp. I'll choose blues, and then I'll click classify. So the default mode is equal counts, which is supposed to put equal quantities of each feature into each of the 5 categories. This data has a lot of small polygons and then the rest being big. So the normal Kommune polygons are kind of outliers if we looked at the histogram. So we get just a uniform map of all the Kommune being in this bottom class for the most part. I'm going to instead choose a different mode. I'm going to choose natural breaks, Jinx. And now we see the larger Kommune in dark blue and the smaller Kommune in white. And when we're using this graduated rendering, that's one of the things we have to do is choose the mode that's going to work to show the trend in the data that we want to highlight. We can also choose the number of classes. The default is 5. I can move this up to 7. If you recall, with a monochromatic color ramp like this blues, we don't want to go more than 7 classes because we won't be able to distinguish the different classes too well. I could also choose a diverging color ramp that I discussed, such as red, yellow, blue. And then I could increase the number of classes to something greater than 7 to show more variety in the data. So we see the smaller Kommune around Copenhagen and the larger Kommune out in Jylland. So if we expand this in the layers panel, we can see the classification of our Kommune by polygons by hectares. And each one of these has a white outline around the polygon. Now we have 12 classes here, and I could go into each individual class by clicking on it and change the symbology for that class. But if I want to make a change to all 12 classes simultaneously, I can use this master symbol button. So if I click on this and click on simple fill, this will allow me to change, for example, the outline color of all these polygons simultaneously. So I could change it from white to black and make it a thinner outline and change all those classes simultaneously. That's what this master symbol button is for, so you can make a change like that to all the classes at the same time. So this is how graduated rendering works. It has to be a numeric attribute. So again, the steps are to choose graduated, choose the attribute, and the step that's easy to forget is you always have to click this classify button to force QGIS to go through the attribute column and put all the different values into one of the different bins that have been created here. And you also have to choose the correct mode. We could tell that equal count quantile doesn't really create a very interesting map for this set of data. But we can try others to see if they show the data better. This is equal interval. This is pretty breaks, natural breaks. These are standard algorithms. And you can see they each produce a slightly different map. So you can also go in and you can edit the values of these class bounds and put in maybe a round number and adjust those. You can also double click in the legend and type your own text. So you could type smallest here and largest here, so that you get a description of what's in that class. So by default, you're going to have the numeric range, but you can type anything into the legend for a classified layer like this. So now I'm going to turn these other layers back on, and I'm going to zoom to the previous extent where we were. And we're going to turn on cities. Maybe I'll zoom out just a little bit farther to show the Copenhagen area. And since I'm zoomed out, I'm going to make these markers a little smaller so we can distinguish them a little bit. So here we have an attribute for the communa that the city lies within. So instead of a single symbol renderer, I could give these points a color based on the communa that they lie within. To do that, I would choose a categorized rendering. So the categorized rendering is similar to graduated, but this can use a text column, whereas graduated requires a number. And so when we have a column that is going to give the name of something, we can use that with the categorized renderer. So I can choose region name, and then I have to remember to click classify. The color ramp it's going to use by default is random colors. I click classify, and here it's basically dividing the cities up by region, giving each region its own color. I can also choose to classify them by communa noun. I'll click classify to overwrite my initial one, and now every communa's cities are in a different color. And the same thing applies here. It's going to put the value in the legend box here. You can go in and edit this text if you need to, though. You can also go in and change individual symbols how you like. And you can use the master symbol here to change characteristics of all the symbols like we did before. Whenever you're using this categorized rendering, it's going to leave this one here for all other values. And this is in case there's a feature in the data set that doesn't have a value in this column. It has a null value for the communa name. And one thing you can do when you are using this kind of rendering is you can right click on the layer in the layers panel and show the feature count. And when you do this, it's going to count the features in the layer, but it's also going to count the number of features in each class. So we can go down to the bottom and see that there aren't any in that all other values class. So we can remove that class. And so whenever you're classifying data like this, using this categorized or the graduated rendering, you can select a class and hit the delete button to remove that so you don't have that. And since we didn't have any features in that category, it's okay for me to get rid of that. So now we have all the cities colored by Comuna. Another layer that this works well for is the Cykelrouter. So here we have cycling routes from OpenStreetMap in Denmark. And one of the attributes that we have for this layer is the network. So some are in a local network, some are a national network, some are international cycling networks. And so I could color the cycle routes by the route system that they're in. So to do that, I would again use the categorized renderer like I just did for cities. The value is going to be the network. So I choose the network field and I click classify. And we can see that we have international, local, national, regional. We have a different symbol for each network. And I can then go up to the master symbol button and increase the width so we get wider lines for all of these. And I can go in again and change these symbols. So I can click on an individual symbol and I can change the color for that class. Sometimes when you're dealing with just a few classes, it's nice to go in and change these to symbols that work better. So in the area around Skoskollen, we have some that are in the local network and some that are in the regional network. In this part of the map, since that's all we're seeing, I could actually turn off the other networks since we don't see those in our current map extent. And now we have the cycle routes classified according to the network which they lie in. So in this video, you've seen some of the ways you can use the categorized and graduated renderings to come up with different ways to symbolize data. Both of these can be very powerful because you get to show a little bit about the attributes of the data along with the symbology and show more information on the map.